Hello guys, and welcome back again to the channel. On today's video, we want to discuss about why your compression sounds awful and what to do to fix this. Obviously, at times you might, after compressing, you notice that it sounds a little bit too sibilant or too edgy. You don't quite know how or why this is happening. So in today's video, I want to discuss few things that could be the problem and how to tackle it so you can, get out of this kind of problems, because I quite notice a lot of it, especially on lead vocals for people that are starting out. So let's get on the door and I'll show you on the vocal how or what you could be doing wrong and how to fix this. Let's get on it. Here we are inside the door, guys, to discuss about why your compressor sound awful and what you could be doing wrong, and obviously how to improve this. So having gone through a couple of songs over the years, from people that are starting out, what I tend to notice is a set pattern, which is what I've listed in 5 categories. So the first one is not choosing the right compressor. So what I mean is, if you look through this compressor, you see there's actually different compressor types. So you have your VCA, you have the studio FET, you have classic VCA, vintage VCA, then vintage FET, opto. So as all these compressors are different, the same way is how their sound are different, and also the way they react to sound are different. So obviously taking your time to actually study this kind of different compressors. There's even a digital platinum. Obviously it's just a normal digital compressor, like the C2 by Fat Filter or whatever digital compressor that you have, which is not modeled after an analog based compressor. So they all sound different. Obviously these ones add some kind of character, some kind of color. So you need to sort of take your time and just study them. But what I will tell you is, if you know 2, especially for your sounds, you should be okay. If you know something like this, vintage FET or the studio FET, which is classic 1176, followed by the opto, which is more like an LA2A kind of compressor. Once you know these 2, you should be okay to actually use most compressors, because they are quite easy to dial in. But if you obviously want to go a little further, then you should look at things like the classic VCA or the studio VCA, or even this vintage VCA, which is more of bus compressors. But for the sake of this video, obviously I'm more or less focusing on the individual sounds, not the bus processing, but we will get to the bus processing at some point. So what I've narrowed it down to is, 1, be sure to choose the right compressor for the job. If you look at this vocal, for instance, I've actually got an MV2. Obviously, this is not your traditional compressor, I know, but I chose this because of what I wanted to achieve for this sound. Then if you look further down, I've actually got a typical compressor. This is a free compressor by Melda Production, and it's quite good. And as you can see, it's doing something different to what this one is doing, because this one is actually doing low level and high level compression. But choosing the right compressor for your sound, I think, is one of the key to getting the right compressor that doesn't sound awful. So the second one is actually setting your attack and release right, because a lot of people obviously just either use what's been left on a preset or just set theirs, but not actually tweaking it to suit their sound. Because remember, if you have a rap vocal and you have the attack a bit fast to catch the the peak and stuff, when you have someone singing, you need to let that the transient come through a little bit, just to have a bit more feeling to the sound. So you can use the same fast attack, maybe fast release, to clamp down on everything, because this one is now more mellow. So you need to change the attack and release. So knowing the right attack and release is the second problem why your compressors sound awful. So the third problem on my list why your compressor might be sounding awful is not choosing the right detector type for your compressor. Obviously not all compressors have got this, but I've just pulled up this isotope neutron because it's a good example. If you look here, there's root mean square, which is RMS detector. There's peak detector before you then have through. Obviously either peak or RMS is what I normally tend to choose. But if you keep using peak, it actually just clamps down on every peak that pokes out through your sound. But when it's on RMS, it actually measures more of the audio and add more gentle compression, which I think the root mean square is usually about, square root of 2 is what it uses. So say for instance, instead of your compressor clamping down, peak that is at 10, if you then apply RMS, it might clamp 7, because I think square root of 10 should be 7.2, I think. Obviously, we're not here for mathematics, but just know that choosing the right detector goes a long way to giving you a smoother sound. RMS tend to sound more smooth than peak. Obviously, there are occasions where the peak detection is needed, especially if you have unruly peaks and you want to clamp it down. But once you've used, say for instance, your first compressor to clamp down peaks, the next one, you be ideal to use RMS, so it's sort of smoothing things out, more or less what an opto compressor will give you. So that's the third on my list. Then the fourth one is actually not using serial compression. So if we look through this sound, for instance, I have this compressor. I have CLA doing some parallel compression. Then I also have this doing more compression. So this is called serial compression. Let's just have a listen to this vocal, and I'll try to use one compressor to get the whole thing. You see how bad it will sound.
I used to think a Porsche make it better. Flicking it and sporting that Cayenne, I'll give it pepper. Another bailiff on the phone, another court letter. Pouring all that water up my nose so I could snort better. All the pressure on the net, it caused a forced error. Ghosted every dickhead on my phone and every raw seller. Freezing cold without no blanket.
So let me go ahead and try to use one compressor to get all this in. Let's try to use this neutron.
I used to think a Porsche make it better. Flicking it and sporting that Cayenne, I'll give it pepper. Another bailiff on the phone, another court letter. Pouring all that water up my nose so I could snort better. All the pressure on the net, it caused a forced error. Ghosted every dickhead on my phone and every raw seller. Freezing cold without no blanket, needed warm weather. A mattress on the floor with just a worn sweater.
Obviously, the level might not be matched, but one thing you notice is how oversaturated and almost like pumping effect that this is already adding to the sound, compared to when we have serial compression that are doing gentle at a time, which gives you cleaner sound. So the last on the list is using compressor when you don't need to. This is, I think, the biggest problem as well. Every engineer thinks that they need to compress every sound, but sometimes actually knowing when not to compress is the key. Because you might see my setup where I actually have about 2 or 3 compressors, but at times they are not actually doing anything. The good example is usually when I throw on something like Distressor by UAD or the IK Multimedia one. So let's just go grab the IK Multimedia one quickly, and I'll show you guys what I tend to do with it, which is not compressing, rather just using the sound. Because if you set this on 1:1, it's not gonna compress, but you will still utilize the distortion or the saturation that's built into this. So sometimes knowing when not to actually compress your sound is the key to getting a good sound and not have a compressor that sounds awful for your sound. Let's just have a listen to this, see the kind of tonality that this will give us without compression.
Freezing cold without no blanket, needed warm weather. A mattress on the floor with just a worn sweater. I'm watching all them ticks turn blue. I ain't riding, but they silence like the sticks on mute. I needed guidance in my life, I said my days weren't blue. Another day skint, scheming, feeling deja vu. But if you're deep in all them secrets, that's what gets you. That must be the reason all these stellars that I get through. Lonely and depressed you. Trying to stay strategic as I'm breathing, see the chest.
So you definitely see there's no gain reduction happening at all. But with this tone and this kind of distortion, 2 and distortion 3, which is different types of saturation or distortion, you see that there's a sound that's been imparted on the sound. So this is the 5th one, knowing when not to add compression or knowing when not to compress your sound at all is also an art. So I hope this is helpful, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that super thanks and super sticker because it does help the channel. Let me know in the comment section what you think about this video, and if you enjoy it, be sure to subscribe and also, join my membership if you like to see my full mix breakdowns and stuff. If you like me to mix your song, DM me or book me directly on engineers.com/Zany Pro. Until next time, see you guys on the next video. Bye now.